and start the recording. All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Johan Matthews, and I serve as a community engagement facilitator over at the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast, CFNE for short, and we've partnered with the Boston Ujima Project to bring you this session, Co-op 101. And a lot of folks signed up, and I'm hoping they'll make their way in as we begin. So I'm just gonna dive in and maybe even, give you folks the opportunity to introduce yourselves if there's still a few of us by the time we get there. So a little bit about the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast. We're a nonprofit CDFI, a community development financial institution, and we're interested in co-ops, as the name suggests, right? And we are especially interested in co-ops as they support economic, social, and racial justice. And we support co-ops through co-op-friendly financial products, mostly loans and other financial support as needed and able. And we're able to provide business coaching, connections, and content like this program or training and other online content you can find on our website, as well as serving as an investment opportunity for socially conscious investors. So we've been around for quite a while, and we're still learning and still trying to engage emerging communities who are trying to engage in cooperative enterprise. So a little bit about me has been said and the Co-op Fund. Let's get a little bit about you guys. Initially, I think 46 plus folks signed up, so I never intended to have folks come off mute and share a little bit about themselves, but I'll welcome one or two of you to do so, or just drop it in the chat, your name, your organization, and your city, and which animal represents you today and why. Which one of these bad boys represent you guys? All right. Who's that, Trisha?
Yeah.
Oh, which one? Feel free to
I can't answer that. That's crazy. Maybe the doggy, but that little pony's pretty cute too. So I work with Community Development Partnership. We're a nonprofit on Cape Cod, and we are always looking for ways to support our clients. And we've had some people express interest in forming co-ops. So when I saw this opportunity to attend the seminar, I jumped on it. So thanks for having it.
Excellent, excellent. We've got some other folks. Mark Hernandez, student at MIT. Cat with the hat is calling you. I feel you. I feel you. I'm kind of wide-eyed right now as well, you know? Excellent. Feel free to drop your details in the chat so folks know who are in the room and can connect with you if they feel that you guys have some shared interests. I think another powerful part of these learning opportunities is the opportunity to connect with some other folks. Excellent, excellent. So you'll be able to re-engage this when we get into some breakout groups later. And for today, you can expect less now. We're probably looking at 60 to 70 minutes. I think the Zoom was scheduled till 7:30. And so I'm looking to probably shave off some time, and we'll see where we do so, okay? But the three main learning goals are around discussing entrepreneurship, which is a foundation for cooperative enterprise, and also collective entrepreneurship, which in my experience is a more familiar form of cooperative enterprise for emerging communities, right? We're talking about Black people, Indigenous people, immigrant people. We're usually engaged in cooperative enterprise under a different name. And then we're going to look at some real life true to the name examples of co-ops and cooperative enterprise, specifically a consumer and a worker owned example. Okay. And if you guys have any particular learning goals, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll see if I can work them in. So how might we create thriving communities through cooperative enterprise? Right, that is what we're here to learn and discuss. And before we dive into that, I want to address a narrative that some of us might be explicitly or not so explicitly engaged in. And it's this idea that Black people don't do co-ops, right? You might be in a community where this is becoming less and less true, especially in Boston. But I know for me in upstate New York, I might look around me and I won't necessarily see Black people doing co-ops. And there's reasons why. But if we kept this belief, this prejudice, this prejudged situation that Black people or that immigrants or that this other group of folks who are not connected to the mainstream co-op movement aren't doing co-ops, you might have an idea like this. And so based on that idea, you might have a position of power, right? You might be a lender or a co-op developer, or even someone who is trying to cooperate with other folks. And so if you have this belief, you're going to find yourself, if you're being approached for lending. So right now, I'm going to reshare the screen because it got disconnected here. But I'll continue. Yeah, so this idea that Black people don't do co-ops affects us in a lot of different ways, right? If you're someone with this belief, it might be harmless. But let's say if you are, again, a nonprofit institution, if you're working in a nonprofit institution, you're a lender or a developer, and you see this, you might see that that group gets criminalized a little bit more, right? Asking a little harder questions, the process delaying a little longer, or you might not even have people you think you can cooperate with in your own community. And that plays out dozens of times within an institution who might have 7 lenders or 2 co-op developers or whatever the case is, and dozens of times within a society. And that creates a disproportionality, right? So it moves from prejudice to a discrimination of sorts, right? Criminalizing some groups over others into a disproportionality, right? Tons of white co-ops, not a lot of Black co-ops. And that creates the ground for the collective consciousness to say, okay, maybe we don't need to allocate this many dollars or this much resources. And so this is a pervasive idea that's actually not true. And so we have to ask, why is that, right? And so how did we get here, right? And a lot of us, if we're part of a nonprofit institution who funds or supports co-ops or supports economic development activity, we're coming in at around 2 or 3, right? For the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast, we're coming in around 2, right? We're trying to facilitate capital access to this community of cooperators. And some of us are, engaged in economic development activities. And so 2 or 3 is what's usually the visible responses to this issue. But if you look deeper, we see that at the bottom of this pyramid, there's a cultural disinheritance, right? Up until the 60s or so, Black people were actively engaged in promoting cooperative enterprise as a pathway to economic stability and freedom. And for a long time, that pathway has been cut off, right? Through racially motivated sabotage and economic exclusion. We haven't seen our ancestors starting co-ops or involved. And so a lot of us engaged at that level. And then there's also the institutions that we're all a part of, right? Schools, they don't teach you to cooperate, right? They're kind of like, hide your answers, don't work with each other. And so these skills become underdeveloped, and we've been miseducated as to what business looks like, right? It has to be a capitalist or owner operator struggling to deal with things. And so in my own work, trying to figure out how we can get to wealth and ownership, I've been asking folks, Black folks, folks from emerging communities, right? Immigrant folks, indigenous folks, what does co-op mean to you? And so still hear co-op and they say hippies, right? I say, okay, co-ops, hippies. What about cooperative enterprise? I say hippies in suits. And so one thing that I found our folks relate to is the word collectives. And so a lot of the times we're engaged in collective entrepreneurship, and that's a form of cooperative enterprise, and it's valid, right? And I think as the ecosystem, the mainstream ecosystem is in better relationship with our communities, these types of language are going to become more recognizable as groups who are practicing cooperative enterprise. And we're going to recognize that as we're collectives trying to access capital, that there's a cooperative ecosystem, right, of developers and service providers and funders that we can access. So something I wanted to engage before we dive into the content. And for some of you are professionals in different levels. As I said, there initially were about 46 folks who signed up for this, but I think the technical glitch has us limited. Some of this might be, old news, but let's dive in and see what happens here. Everyone hear the sound?
So I grew up in Limpopo, on the border of Limpopo and Mpumalanga, little town called Mutetema. Water and electricity supply are as unpredictable as the weather. And growing up in these tough situations, at the age of 17, I was relaxing with a couple of friends of mine in winter, and we were sunbathing. The Limpopo sun gets really hot in winter. So as we were sunbathing, my best friend next to me says, "Man, why doesn't somebody invent something that you can just put on your skin and then you don't have to bath?" And I sat and I was like, man, I would buy that, eh? So I went home and I did a little research and I found some very shocking statistics. Over 2.5 billion people in the world today do not have proper access to water and sanitation. 450 million of them are in Africa and 5 million of them are in South Africa. Various diseases thrive in this environment, the most drastic of which is called trachoma. Trachoma is an infection of the eye due to dirt getting into your eye. Multiple infections of trachoma can leave you permanently blind. The disease leaves 8 million people permanently blind each and every year. The shocking part about it is that to avoid being infected with trachoma, all you have to do is wash your face. No medicine, no pills, no injections. So after seeing these shocking statistics, I thought to myself, okay, even if I'm not just doing it for myself and the fact that I don't want a bath, I at least need to do it to try to save the world. So with my trusty little steed, my Nokia 6234 cell phone, I didn't have a laptop, I didn't have internet much, except for the 20 Rand an hour internet cafe. I did research on Wikipedia, on Google about lotions, creams, the compositions, the melting points, the toxicities. I did high school science. And I wrote down a little formula on a piece of paper, and it looked like the KFC special spice, So I was like, okay, so we've got the formula ready. Now we need to get this thing into practice. Fast forward 4 years later, after having written a 40-page business plan on the cell phone, having written my patent on the cell phone, I'm the youngest patent holder in the country, and I can't say any more than that. I had invented dry bath, the world's first bath substituting lotion. You literally put it on your skin and you don't have to bath. So after having tried to make it work in high school with the limited resources I had, went to university, met a few people, got it into practice, and we have a fully functioning product that's ready to go to the market. It's actually available on the market. So we learned a few lessons in commercializing and making dry bath available. One of the things we learned was that poor communities don't buy products in bulk. They buy products on demand. A person in Alex doesn't buy a box of cigarettes, they buy one cigarette each day, even though it's more expensive. So we package dry bath in these innovative little sachets. You just snap them in half and you squeeze it out. And the cool part is, one sachet substitutes one bath for 5 Rand. After creating that model, we also learned a lot in terms of implementing the product. We realized that even rich kids from the suburbs really want dry bath, at least once a week. Anyway, we realized that we could save 80 million liters of water on average each time they skipped a bath. And also we would save 2 hours a day for kids who are in rural areas, 2 hours more for school, 2 hours more for homework, 2 hours more to just be a kid. After seeing that global impact, we narrowed it down to our key value proposition, which was cleanliness and convenience. Dry bath is a rich man's convenience and a poor man's lifesaver. Having put the product into practice, we're actually now on the verge of selling the product onto a multinational to take it to the retail market. And one question I have for the audience today is, on the gravel roads of Limpopo, with an allowance of 50 Rand a week, I came up with a way for the world not to bath. What's stopping you? I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet. And another key thing that I learned a lot throughout this whole process, last year, Google named me as one of the brightest young minds in the world. I'm also currently the best student entrepreneur in the world, the first African to get that accolade. And one thing that really puzzles me is I did all of this just because I didn't want to pass. Thank you.
So, quick, vocab pieces. Entrepreneur, target market, value propositions. These are terms that are put out there. And some of the simplest ways I can define these things are as follows, right? This young man is an entrepreneur in a context very scarce resources, but he's still somebody who was able to solve a problem for a group of people and get paid for it, right? He was able to create value. In the world of cooperative enterprise, you have to still engage in entrepreneurship. You have to take entry and look at an opportunity that exists in the form of a problem and engage that problem innovatively and keep on innovating, right? Target market, the group of people with the problem we're trying to solve. And value proposition, the benefits that target market, that group of people with a problem can expect from your service and product. And I think he did a really good job of laying that out. So reflection, like, who did Ludwig invent dry bath for? And since there's not as many of us as I expected, feel free to come off mute or drop it in the chat. No wrong answers, we're just chatting. We've got his community. Absolutely, right? He kind of invented it for himself, right? Because he didn't want a bath. And then there were other people in his community who had that issue, right? So sometimes we have a business idea, right? We're going to do avocado, raisins, walnuts, and mustard, and it's going to be a great dip, right? Because we love it, but a lot of people don't love it. And so that is an issue that people run into a business. And in the cooperative enterprise, it's the same way. Whether or not you're creating a co-op to meet a larger need, it is going to start with a need that you're sharing with a larger community. And that connection has to be there, right? It has to be something that is relevant to you, but is also connected to a larger community. And so we ask ourselves, how is he different from his friend who said, man, why did someone invent something, right? And I'll just run through these. We're thinking about initiative, right? And in a cooperative enterprise, we still have to take initiative. And lastly, if you want to be an entrepreneur, this one I'll crowdsource, should you start with the product or the target market? For you guys. Kind of a trick question, but let's see. What do you guys think? We got target market. Okay, what else? I think target market. Gotcha. That's, definitely a better way to go than product. But something that could be even more interesting is starting with the problem, right? What problem are we trying to solve? And so a lot of the times we're engaged in social entrepreneurship where we're thinking of a problem that a specific group of people have, right? Or in the case of cooperative entrepreneurship or collective entrepreneurship, we're thinking of a problem that we have that we share with a larger group of people. And so no matter what type of co-op you're engaged with, we have to have these entrepreneurial foundations clear. We have to know what our product or service is, who our target market is, and what benefits they can expect. And so when I'm working, I feel like this is the most fundamental yet missed aspect of co-ops that exist, right? Co-ops are businesses and they're initiated by somebody or a group of people. And so they need to be entrepreneurial. And so it's very important that we have our foundations because co-ops are business. Now, I want to tackle another aspect that we see, collective entrepreneurship. So let's tune into this video here.
Te hablo desde la prisión. Wilson Manjón.
Hola, mi nombre es Alex Amayo.
Mi nombre es María Vázquez.
Mi nombre es Lenny Chapé.
Bien, mi nombre es Rosy.
Mi nombre es Sofía López.
Me llamo Enrique del Valle. Trabajando en el restaurant business desde que llegué a los Estados Unidos, 10 años. Ahorita está llegando la oportunidad de que podamos alcanzar ese sueño, ¿verdad? Ese sueño, el trabajar independientemente, ¿verdad? Que no haya un dueño, que no haya ese jefe que te quiere, que te lo maltratan en el...
Pero entre esquina y esquina siempre habrá lo mismo. Para mí no existe cielo, ni luna, ni estrella.
Tengo 26 años de experiencia. No es tan fácil ser dueño de un negocio y estar nomás trabajando y invirtiendo y sacando muy poco. Y vi la necesidad en la comunidad de expandir un negocio, y eso fue lo que me enfocó a mí. Y se me dio la idea de que este negocio fuera para la comunidad. Me siento bien orgullosa, estoy bien feliz. No cabe en mi corazón la felicidad que siento ahorita.
Tengo aproximadamente como 8 años de experiencia con 2 restaurantes que yo tengo. O sea que para mí el restaurante es algo que lo llevo de mi corazón, y esto de la cooperativa es una gran oportunidad para nuestra comunidad, y estoy muy ansioso de darle fuego a esto para tener algo que nos ayude muchísimo como comunidad hispana.
Y mi experiencia cocinando ha sido desde muy chica, desde muy pequeña. Mis padres me han enseñado a eso porque es un negocio. Mis sueños es tener un lugar especial para dar a conocer mi comida, las comidas, mis tradiciones de Guatemala y en compañía de mis compañeros. Otra cosa porque estamos luchando por la cooperativa es porque se den tratos justos y que nos valoremos como seres humanos, y que a nuestros compatriotas.
Parte de lo que le estamos pidiendo a la comunidad es: necesitamos apoyo, porque esta visión tiene muy poderosa y es un arma que le va a servir para que nuestra comunidad latina pueda encontrar medios económicos.
All right. And so feel free to, drop your immediate reactions in the chat or come off mute. There's still only a few of us. But a few terms that they brought up that I want to make sure we recognize. So they call themselves a collective, and then someone also called themselves a cooperative. And I want to draw distinction there. For a collective, we're thinking of a group of entities, right? These are all individual business owners or chefs who are coming together around a shared issue. In this case, they all wanted better working conditions. And though that's the same context that workers who start a worker-owned cooperative might come into that business feeling. But a collective can be a group of individuals who are chefs who come together to access a kitchen so reduce their costs, right? Kind of like a producer co-op rather than a worker co-op. Or they could be a group of chefs in this case who are coming together to own a restaurant. So it can be either or, right? We can see artist collectives who are coming into, creative entrepreneurship and recognize that we need to purchase bookkeeping together. We need to purchase some media buys together, right? Maybe we can have a website or do a co-working space. And so that collective / worker-owned cooperative, sometimes it seems really, really similar, right? Because they are. And I just wanted to point that out. So reflection questions: who's the owner of Maya Luna restaurant, right? What problems did the workers have at other jobs? And how do they hope the cooperative will fix it? And how do you think productivity will be affected in a business where there is no boss? So we would have done some breakout groups, and maybe we still will. I'll create breakout groups of maybe 2 or 3, or we can just have the conversation in the live room. I can't see everyone, but what do you guys think?
Johan, I have to actually sign off at 6:45, so that might impact your ability to make breakout numbers. I don't know how many numbers we have, but
no problem. Thank you for sharing. All right, so for now, let's just discuss it in the main room, okay? And then we'll see about breakouts for the next one. So who's the owner, right? Drop it in the chat, come off mute, of Maya Luna Restaurant. The cooperative. So what does that mean? The cooperative, right? So in this case, it could be the case that a cooperative, which is a business form, right? You've got nonprofits on one side, for-profits on another side, and a co-op right in the middle. It's a social enterprise, but it's a recognized business form. And in this case, the owners of that business would be its workers. Now, in this case, these workers were all individual restaurateurs, right? They had their own restaurants, so they were chefs or people who just love cooking. And so they're coming together to try to create this restaurant where they can all be owners. Or they could have maintained their own individual businesses and create a stall, a series of stalls within a space, right? Kind of like a food hall or food kitchen. And so you can have multiple formations, but in this case, the workers were the owners, right? And what problems did the workers have at other jobs? In the video, they discussed being mistreated by a boss. And so what does it mean to be your own boss is the adventure they're on, right? And how do they hope the cooperative restaurant will fix it? So what do you guys think? How do they hope that the restaurant will fix it? And how do you think productivity will be affected in a business where there's no boss?
Well, with respect to the subpart D question, I think you don't need a boss, but you need to have clear communication about expectations among the members and who's doing what and things like that, to make sure that everyone's on the same page and what needs to get done is getting done.
Yep. Thank you. Anyone else?
I just dropped this in the chat, but I mentioned that they'll have more agency and ownership or stake in the business since it's co-owned in the collective as well.
Yeah, right. They're gonna think outside the box. They're gonna continue to be the workers they were, but they'll have an additional layer of ownership, right? Additional layer of autonomy, control over what they do. So in this case, we have workers or restaurateurs coming together to create an opportunity for themselves, right? And as I said before, we had some vocab, right? It mentioned collective, it mentioned cooperative, it mentioned the worker-owned cooperative. And so this is the first entry point, even though it could be the case that these are all individual business owners who are purchasing use of a kitchen to reduce their costs or things like that. But a cooperative is a business owned, operated by, and benefiting its members, right? It's a member-owned business. And its members could be workers who want better conditions. Its workers could be individual entrepreneurs who want to purchase things together to reduce their costs, right? Like restaurateurs who might share a kitchen. Its owners can be customers who are missing an important service or business in their community. And so they band together, all 1,000 of them, to own a business that provides a use for them, right? Like a credit union or grocery store. And we'll dive into some of these as we go on. So let's keep rocking. Let me show you an example of a consumer-owned grocery store.
All right, Brian, thank you much. After 6 years of planning and preparing, the Gem City Market is finally open. It's a project community members in Dayton took into their own hands after a public health meeting back in 2015. And 2 News reporter Lee Williamson is live at the market with how far we've come since that day.
As you can hear from the music behind me, there's a lot of excitement around the grand opening of the Gem City Market. That's because it's not your average grocery store. As a grocery co-op, it belongs to the entire community, and everyone's reminded of that when they walk into the doors.
Welcome to your grocery store!
With 4,300 member owners, the Gem City Market opened Wednesday as a store owned and operated by the community.
It's ours. You know, we all have a part in this.
The member owners pay a one-time fee to keep the store up and running. Located in a food desert in the West Dayton area, the focus is on bringing fresh, quality food to those who need it most.
About broccoli, peppers, and avocado. I'm trying to eat healthy.
Being in a food desert, it's so limited to have fresh fruits and vegetables.
But shopping is not limited to just food. There's a community kitchen where people can learn more about taking care of their health and wellness.
My goal is to have our participants take the fresh fruits and vegetables and fabricate them into healthy meals.
And the store also promotes local businesses like Third Perk Coffee House and provides jobs.
Over 80% of our staff live directly around the market in the trade area, which is beautiful.
The For Us, By Us approach to the market is one of the first models of its kind in the country.
That we can build and have our own and keep our own, you know what I'm saying? And I said, this is the first of many to come.
It's important to remember you do not have to be a member to shop here. It's open to everyone in the community and beyond. Reporting in Dayton, Aaliyah Williamson, 2 News, working for you.
All right, Aaliyah.
Excellent, excellent. Such sweet ladies doing all those dancing and things. So who is the owner of Gem City Market? Come off mute, drop it in the chat. We're just gonna stay in this main room. Don't be shy. Community members, local community, absolutely right. And is just reading some comments. It is the local community who owns this, right? So in the case of this grocery store, these people consider themselves to be in a food desert, or maybe they were told that, right? Part of cooperative economics is self-determination. And so some people are now referring to these things as food apartheids. You know, naming it for yourself is very important. But regardless, they identified a problem, right? They didn't have access to healthy food, to grocery stores. And so a community of people, 1,000, 5,000 people came together, pooled their resources, and were able to open up a grocery store. So unlike the Maya Luna restaurant, where the workers are the owners, this is owned by the customers, right? And the workers might still be employees, or they may be a separate class of ownership where they can become owners too, right? So it could be that there's a worker class and a customer class or a consumer class, but this is an example of a consumer-owned cooperative. Another example of a consumer-owned cooperative could be, as I said earlier, a credit union, right? A financial institution like a bank where the members who deposit their money there are the owners, right? They vote on how the bank operates. They, receive benefits based on that, and so on. And so the owner of the Gem City Market would be the local community. And so what problems did they have? We talked about it: food desert, food apartheid, lack of access to food. How do they hope the cooperative grocery store will fix it? And how do you think the business will be affected by community ownership? What do you guys think? These last two, C and D. Come off mute, drop it in the chat. How do you think the business is gonna be affected by community ownership? And what what do the folks hope that the grocery store will fix?
I think it would be access to healthy foods, no?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So giving everybody a place to shop that they can walk to.
Yeah, definitely. That is a functional goal without a doubt, right? And
I was gonna say secondarily, maybe community wealth building as well, if everybody's an owner.
yes, now we have social goals, right? So not only is it functionally achieving the food need, it is socially achieving this sense of community wealth, right? We own it. We can come in here and dance how we dance and talk how we talk, right? And I think that plays into emotional goals too. So sometimes ownership isn't just about solving problems or building wealth. It's just about how we feel. So that's a really powerful aspect of cooperatives as well. Let's keep rocking unless someone else has a thought or question.
I do. I have a question that just came up as you were talking. One of the things as I'm learning more about co-ops is, you know, we're building community and agency with multiple people that have multiple perspectives. And so I always find that as a community grows, so do the perspectives, and then that like common goal and agenda can also cause some tension as you're trying to have competing priorities that you're balancing when you have a cooperative or some type of community ownership. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it takes place on a variety of levels. It depends on where the cooperative is in its organizational stage, right? Let's say we're at the very beginning and there's a team of us and we have a vision and we're just getting started to figure out what this co-op thing and who members are. In the beginning, we might have all had a very clear picture of what this thing was or would have been. But by the time we're starting recruiting members, now we've got to think about, well, do they have the same vision that we had? Is it solving the same problem? And it may not. However, the way that you articulate that problem is going to be relevant throughout the entire life of the organization. So I'll say it like this. If you thought that initially we are solving that food problem, right? Everybody involved is recognizing that there's a food problem. And then later on, now we're thinking about healthy foods. So members are now voting for more expensive options, right? Members are voting for things that seem, you know, more uppity, right? Like organic stuff. And so is the goal food access or, you know, healthy food? And if we make the food more pricey than the folks can afford, are we achieving our mission? And so you have those types of minor changes. And if you have a very clear vision at the beginning, you can keep referring to that all the way through. Now, it might also be the case that Black people needed something, right? We don't have a grocery store in our community, it's majority Black and so on. And then as the market grows, we have all types of people, right? We have Spanish speaking folks, white folks, other folks are now trying to come into this. And how do we reconcile the various needs of the community? And so I think the way to do that is going to be, again, having that core mission and vision articulated, right? You want to have one overall, over-encompassing goal that reconciles everyone's interests. Say you had workers and you had farmers that you bought produce from, and you had customers who are trying to buy produce. Customers want what? Cheaper food. Farmers want what? Better prices for their goods. How do you reconcile those two if they're going to be members of the co-op? Well, the main important thing you'd have to do is make it about one thing that they both relate to, which might be food. And so if we're going to provide food in this community, customers might have to pay this price and farmers might have to accept this price. But because of that one unifying goal, we can reconcile the differences and move things forward. So I think you always have to find the common ground or the main important thing that reconciles the differences, right? Because people are going to have competing interests or things are going to change over time. And so that is the way that you have to think about those differences. And I'm not sure if you had a particular example or if I spoke to some of the things you thought about, but it can show up in so many ways.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. And the example that you posed with like the food and, you know, having folks want more organic food for health reasons versus just, you know, solving the problem of a food desert or apartheid was the question I was actually going to ask, because I've seen that happen and it didn't really lead anywhere. So yeah, I think that was a great example. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah. It's something that the cooperative is going to have to address over the course of its organizational stage, growth and stage change, because, you know, you don't stay the same, but if you are able to consistently refer to your core mission, vision, values, then you're going to have a little bit more, you're going to be in integrity if you're advocating for staying this way or for growing that way, right? If you can reference that. All right. Let's keep rocking. So, consumer-owned cooperative, right? This is a co-op whose members are its customers or its consumers, right? Or the people who use its services. Stakeholder, they reference these words in the video. Person with an interest or concern in something. And so a multi-stakeholder co-op would be a co-op, as I mentioned, with different classes of membership. Maybe there's a producer class for the farmers, the worker class for the workers, and a consumer class for the customer. And once you have all these classes under one roof, you're gonna have to do what we just discussed, which is reconcile their interests going under one specific thing that they will all have to make sacrifices to accommodate, as opposed to thinking they're all gonna get their needs met when their interests are conflicting. So let's watch one last video, and then I'll dive into some more content, and after that, we can kind of look at what people are specifically interested in. I'm happy to talk more about that.
Yo siempre he soñado con mi propio negocio, pero después de venir de un país donde el idioma es diferente, todo es muy diferente, la situación es mucho más complicada para mí. Entonces, leí, me informé y se me dio la oportunidad de una cooperativa.
A Yard and a Half was founded in 1988. I came on board in 1996. It was a good fit, that's why I never left.
Eileen, who's our former boss, she really just found good people and then found a way to make them fit and really grew the company based on the strengths of the people that she had working for her.
At first, when we started, the idea wasn't so popular. You know, what will happen to us? That who's gonna be our new boss? Are they gonna keep us? Are they buying just the name of the company?
Democracy at Work Institute is a resource for both existing worker co-ops, but also for businesses considering co-op conversion. They're thinking about things like company culture and financing and what does the relationship need to be between the departing owner and the employees and all these sorts of things. One of the challenges, I think, for an owner thinking about co-op conversion is becoming conscious of all of the hats that they wear as a sole owner. So when the time came to sell the company to the employees, one of the things that she did was to sort of develop a management team where 5 of us started meeting with her on a regular basis, and she started being more transparent about what it takes to run a business.
Sí, a veces hay que informarse y leer, invertir tiempo extra, pero también al entender de cómo funciona una cooperativa, dan ánimo, da gana de seguir.
We have 50% membership right now. We aim to make money on our jobs so that we can pass it along to people.
Since we became a co-op, we've been sharing more bonuses. Some people, they have purchased their own houses.
Cooperativa es una de las mejores opciones, porque tampoco se convierte en una forma de complacer caprichos de una sola persona, sino es tu negocio, pero es también poner a la gente en primer lugar.
More than good jobs.
More than good job.
Más que buenos trabajos,
Ownership.
Ownership.
somos dueños.
All right. So feel free to consider immediate reactions. Just a few ideas that I want to make sure we cover, specifically just the co-op conversion. So in this example, we have a business that was owned by an individual, and eventually that individual sold that business to her workers, and the employees became the owners. And so that was a co-op conversion, right? So co-op could be an exit strategy for a business owner. And it can't be exclusively that, because it's not easy to get people to take on a sense of ownership. But it is an opportunity to create a legacy, right? Because today a lot of kids aren't necessarily trying to pick up the family business, and the workers are more committed. So it's an interesting opportunity. So immediate thoughts, and we've got some reflection questions. What do you guys think of that one? But specifically, I'd like to ask, how do you cultivate ownership? What do you guys think about that piece, right? Because we know who the owner is now and so on, but how do you cultivate ownership? No wrong answers, drop it in the chat, come off mute. Go ahead, Boston.
I was just gonna say quickly, I think before they even became worker owners, there was probably a sense of pride in their work, and maybe a sense of like autonomy or something like that, that they were allowed to do things in their own way, and that probably fostered, you know, the feelings that allowed them to feel like they could own it.
Definitely, right? You probably don't want to own something you're not proud of. So I think that is going to be true throughout the entire course, whether you're thinking of joining a co-op, right? Because a lot of people are intimidated by the prospect. They said they had 50% ownership, right? So why not 100%? People are intimidated by ownership sometimes, or sometimes they're turned off by ownership because maybe they're not so proud of the business or of whatever it is. And so we've got in the chat, teamwork too, definitely, right? You're gonna see later, do you like the other people you're gonna be owners with, right? Because all of a sudden you guys are having shared responsibility for something, and you have to work together, and you can't just quit your job because you own it. In a co-op, there's a process to leave, and if there's not a process to leave, it's a cult. But ultimately, you are responsible for something, and you aren't just and you aren't just gonna walk away. So you want to like the people you're working with. So it's a very interesting question. Ownership is not easy. Ownership is not just that sense of pride and responsibility, but it's actually a capacity, right? It is an ability to respond to the issues of the thing you own. And it's not so easy to own a business, right? You have to know specifically how the business makes money. And a lot of the time, folks are joining co-ops or want to create a co-op, but they're not engaging that entrepreneur piece, that business piece, and recognizing how each dollar is coming into the business and how each dollar is coming out. And I think that's a really critical piece for co-ops that I want to see us start to develop more, especially in our community. Why do you guys think productivity increased, or any other thoughts or questions on that piece? Because it did.
Yeah, I guess I would say it's probably like related to like this is ours, and we want to make sure that we are like this thing that we're investing in. But I think there's ways in which I think the co-op becomes I don't know, sort of a responsibility, like being successful in this, like also impact their long-term goals and like their like current standing. And so I think there's a desire, I think, to like do the best just so we can maintain and keep this and strengthen this so we can continue to like thrive and be supported. I imagine at least.
Yeah, definitely. Right. I think when you're looking at something like this, it's not just a shared burden, right? It's not just responsibility in the sense that you have to take care of things. It's a responsibility in the opportunity to grow something, right? To have voices of your workers, to have the imagination of the team be unlocked and engaged is a very powerful thing, right? And so you need a lot of skills and systems to do so, right? Transparency, as Aminata put in the chat, and learning, right? Just constant learning and constant sharing of information. So absolutely. So let's keep rocking, right? So we talked about this. What is a co-op, right? And I try to give you the simplest definition I could, and that is a member-owned business. And that business is owned by, operated by, and benefiting its members. Its members could be residents in a house, or residents in an apartment complex, or residents in a plot of land where everyone owns their own house, right? Those are the members of that business. The members could be individual entrepreneurs and shops who want to purchase things together. The members could be individuals who need financial services, right? They want to access loans or savings. It could be workers in a business who want to own the business and be autonomous. It could be parents who want to own childcare institutions, right? Or it could be childcare workers if it's a worker co-op who are working together to provide childcare. So a co-op is a member-owned business, and those members benefit and operate that business as well, which is different from a lot of the forms of business we might encounter, right? The nonprofit organization is usually stratified at a community root, at a grassroots level, at a community level. It's pretty flat, right? You have a board, and that board are all volunteers, and they all serve the people in their community, which might be themselves. But a mature nonprofit is usually stratified, right? You've got a board of directors that are well-to-do folks, philanthropists, whoever. Then you've got the staff, right, which might be college educated, other folks, right, not from that community. And then you've got the beneficiaries, right, people in the community who are needing that service. And in a corporation, a mature one, it's the same thing, right? You've got the investor owners who never ever see the business, don't have to, they can just do it in the stock market. Then the actual operators, the staff, and then the beneficiaries, somebody else. So in these forms of businesses, they're stratified, they're separated. But in the co-op, they can all be one and the same, right? You can have a cooperative grocery store owned by its customers. So they're going to shop there to maintain. Then some of them can work there. They take a job or they volunteer their time. And then of that membership, that 5,000 people, 10 of which work it, maybe 5 are elected to be the board of directors. So a co-op is a unique configuration where all those interests can be reconciled together. So do you shop at a co-op? And if you guys are in Boston, here are some local examples. Do you guys recognize any of these? Drop a +1 or just the actual brand if you recognize any of these co-ops in your community or shop at it. Okay, we got some thumbs ups. Absolutely, absolutely. There you go. So you guys may or may not have been familiar with co-ops before, but sometimes we're shopping at a co-op and we don't even know, right? A lot of us probably never considered Ace Hardware original co-op, but they have a purchasing co-op. They purchase together. And Cabot, right? You know, getting cheeses and things like that, or so many other popular national brands. And then we have some regional examples as well. So should you start a co-op, right? Maybe some of you have already jumped past this question, but here are a few litmus test-like questions you can ask yourself. One, are there shared needs and goals, right? Do we have shared needs and aspiration as it pertains to the idea of starting a co-op, right? What is our shared problem? Two, is the business idea sound, right? We might all need access to food, but if our plan to do so isn't gonna work beyond this week, right? Like we're just gonna exchange food, maybe it's not a co-op, maybe it's a mutual aid effort, right? In a co-op, which is a form of business, we wanna have a sound business idea. Specifically, from video one, we wanna have a problem that we're looking to solve for other people that they can pay for. We wanna have a target market, a group of people in mind. We wanna have a value proposition, an idea of the benefits these people would expect and why they would create value for us, right? How would they create a profit, or in this case of a co-op, a surplus? You want to think, do we have 3+ members who are comfortable working together, right? Do we like each other? In a worker co-op, you might only be needing 3 to 5 people, right? Because we're going to work it and we don't need to, you know, spread ourselves that wide, right? We don't have enough jobs yet. Or it could be 1,000 people coming together to create a consumer co-op, or it could be 15 people coming together to create a housing co-op. So do we have 3+ members who like each other? Or is the purpose for the member benefit or a return on investment, right? Is someone trying to sell the co-op to a group of people right off the bat, right? They're probably not going to build a good co-op. Or if it's for individual benefit, as opposed to the community of members benefit, it's probably not leaning towards a co-op, which is fine. Your orientation could be, I want to create wealth, or I have a really creative idea. In that case, you may want to engage a traditional business form with cooperative elements, right? You might be interested in cooperative elements, and you can engage in shallow pools of cooperative engagement, right? You can have a membership plan like Spotify. You're not a co-op, but you have a way for folks to engage, and so on and so forth. Or if your issue is really systemic and far-reaching, it might affect a lot of people's life. Maybe it's better for it to be a nonprofit that operates as a member-directed nonprofit or a worker-directed nonprofit. So a cooperative enterprise that takes on the nonprofit form. But in the middle is that cooperative form where it's a business owned by its members. 5, shared leadership and decision-making, meaning no one wants total control, right? There's no unspoken rules as to how decisions are made. The decision-making is clear, right? One member, one vote, consensus, majority. We have a clear decision-making pathway, and no one person has full control, even though social dynamics always come into play. This is a good sign that you can do a cooperative business. And if that's the case, then yes, get started. And so there's no straightforward path into cooperation, but this is a pretty simple and clear pathway, right? You build your team, right? You recognize you have a problem. You ask if other folks have that problem. You start attending different community meetings, just shaking the branches, and you get enough people together to create a steering committee, right? 3 to 5 people who can commit to exploring this idea and seeing if it even makes sense, right? They're just going to commit to exploring the idea and bringing it into fruition, or canceling it if it doesn't make sense. So after you have your steering committee, you go to the problem finding piece, right? We define our shared problem. After you define that shared problem, we learn together, right? We engage in community learning. We explore other co-ops, co-op models and business models, and we maybe engage in a feasibility study. Is this business feasible? Is there enough customers nearby? Is there enough interest in a co-op? So on and so forth. Then we might do some customer discovery, which is an extension of that, right? We want to now start looking into the actual business itself and map stakeholders and do research. And then maybe we're starting to build community. So we start doing some pop-up events. We start outreaching to members, and we start creating some documents to recruit them, and it's illustrating what our agreements might be, right? This might also be a time for folks to do member buy-in. So we're now creating a little pot of money that we can get started with. And so we've got enough interest in the community. We've got some idea of various co-op models. Maybe we now form the business, right? We file legally to incorporate as a cooperative corporation, or some other version that's available in your state, or even something like an LLC, but we have some cooperative partnership agreements. And you're also going to be forming the business from a branding and planning standpoint. And then you might get down to the point where you need to access capital, right? So you're looking at members to contribute information. Yeah, likely. I'm not as familiar with Massachusetts statute, but yes, you guys have a pretty active co-op ecosystem. It's probably straightforward cooperative corporation, and they may have others, and we can kind of quickly find out. But I would, you know, consult the state statutes, because I live in New York, so I'm a little more familiar with New York. But we also would look into capital access in the form of member contribution, pre-sales, grants, loans, and then finally we get to launch. So this is a pretty clean journey, and it doesn't go like this. People have many different journeys, right? This might be an example of a journey, and you might ask yourself, what's the next step? And we can talk about that. So any questions on these journeys? I'll also cover 2 other types of journeys. So it might be the case that you guys start off in a group already, right? You and a few people recognize that, you know, we have poetry nights and we need our own space, right? And so you have a session and you realize this needs to be a co-op, right? And so you start attending conferences and meeting people, and you start talking to lenders, and somebody approves you for a loan. And then you open your business, and your business doesn't do so well. So you have to revisit your business plan, and you get connected to a developer, and you relaunch your business. And all of a sudden, you know, you're in a better place, or, you know, not still there, right? You're on a journey to profitability, right? Because you started in community. Whereas other folks might be interested more in community, right? I had a group of farmers, and they recognized that I didn't want to farm alone. That was the overwhelming connection piece. They didn't want to farm alone. And so they started to band together to farm. They launched a GoFundMe, and they said, you know, what should we be? No, we can't be another nonprofit. So they had some inkling of a co-op, and they got started, and they tried to seek help, but the support they were looking at weren't familiar with co-ops, right? So this is a lot of what we find in our community, in Black communities and so on, urban communities. There isn't a lot of culturally relevant co-op development support. And so we're kind of traded around, and you're applying for different things. Some didn't work out. And so you lose membership, you lose momentum, and you keep working on it, and you're on a path to community. So there's many journeys that you can engage on, right? There's not any particular one. And so now I want to invite you guys to take 5 minutes to design your own cooperative. And we can talk out the pieces. If you do have an idea and you want 5 minutes, we can do that. Or we can just go through each of these pieces. This is an activity that we created for a festival in Kingston. And, you know, there's other resources like this, like the ownership model canvas and the business model canvas, that you can use and combine to create a nice sketch of what your co-op could be. So how are you guys feeling? Do you guys want to talk through pieces of this? Would you guys like to take a minute to reflect and consider how your co-op might be? So thumbs up if you'd like 5 minutes to start catching this for yourself, or if we should just talk it out.
If no one has a preference, I'll jump in.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm just gonna I'm just gonna dive in. Okay, immediately I'm like, a problem that I see in my community. We don't have enough venues for music. So what if it was like a music venue co-op? I haven't really seen that.
All right. That's it.
What can you do together that you can't easily do alone? Definitely either renting or buying a space is usually something that people do in collectives anyway. So collectively renting an event venue for people to have different events at would be the thing. Let's see, what would be different about the world when you succeed? It's another venue. There really aren't that many. I think there's like 5 in Boston. Without watered down drinks too. There's lots of contingencies in here. Who is outside of the cooperative that is needed for success? Probably musicians. Musicians and people that want to, you know, throw events like that, have parties. Who will organize together to meet this need? So this is actually kind of interesting. So I think it could be producers and workers, because there are people that are like event producers and that could be also considered a worker. So I would say both of those. And you know, like, yeah, okay, so those 2, sorry, thinking through it. What would each member have to contribute? And I guess that would depend on like how built out the space is. Because I know sometimes when people rent out retail spaces or whatever, they find that like they need to outfit it to their specific needs. So it would probably be money, and some handy folks who know how to do things, like build homes or, you know, what have you. What decisions will be made? Who will decide what? Yeah, I think that one's trickier because there are people that are like, you know, business managers who, just because you're someone who throws like events does not necessarily mean that you'd be like a good business manager. So I would be curious what people have to say about that, because I really don't know the answer to that. I think event spaces and like club spaces and all those different things require specific expertise like hospitality. What will each member of the cooperative be entitled to? Probably money, and then like space to operate whatever they're creating. And then what equipment and assets would the cooperative need to succeed? Immediately, sound system, like some type of food license, or like someone to make some food, someone to make some drinks, and you know, lighting equipment and all that good stuff that makes like that environment fun.
There you go. Good stuff. You know what I mean? Absolutely give her a hat. I think you're spot on, right? In some of the tensions that you're picking up on, right? The first being producers and workers, right? It could be a bunch of entrepreneurs who come together to achieve cheaper venue, right? To achieve more profitable events by having a cheaper venue. Or it could be the fact that they invite workers to be a part of it too, or the workers do it, and then they invite the producers. And I think that speaks to the other piece with the who will decide what, right? If you are in this position where there's different expertise, right? Members, producers, workers, maybe you create a decision matrix to say what decisions can be made by what type of people, right? So what space? All members. What band? Just the creatives. What equipment? Just the producers who are aware of the tools. You know what I mean? So you can determine who can make what decisions together based on what you think makes sense. So lots of interesting opportunities to break down the details in what you said, but I think that's a good example. And any other thoughts or questions based on the example of just getting started? Excellent. Really appreciate you offering up, and maybe you just created a cooperative or at least an engagement that people can cooperate with you to fulfill. And so you're thinking about how do we get to cooperatively ever after, right? You started with a pioneer, somebody sees an opportunity and explores it. Then you get a circus, right? Various talented people join in. And so you have that steering committee, and then maybe you start to break out tasks by expertise or whatever the case is, what's needed. And then after that, you know, it kind of gets a little gray, right? And so we want to be able to ask ourselves, what's going to be different because we're working together, right? What are we going to think, right? And some people needed to think, I'm not alone, or they needed to think outside the box. We want to rehumanize, right? Because in the standard business transformation scheme, it usually is dehumanization. Once we become standardized, we dehumanize. And so in the co-op, we want to rehumanize. What will we feel, right? And a lot of the things that I know we want to feel is that we have the power to create change in our lives, in our communities. And then autonomy, right? What will we do, right? And so we're thinking about how we're going to act boldly, take positions of power, create structures that serve us, create homegrown institutions. And so I want to challenge you guys to think about, even if you come together to do a business deal with other people, how is that going to change things, right? What are you going to think, feel, and do differently? Because cooperatives have the power to shift, not just, you know, the ability to meet your needs by doing so cooperatively, but much larger picture issues. And so getting started, engage your community. And that's not just other potential cooperators and collaborators. These are technical assistance providers. These are nonprofit institutions in your community who might have some inclination around this. Start engaging your broader co-op community of service providers and cooperators or entrepreneurs and organizers, and start understanding what are the shared problems so that you can define the problem. And ultimately, you grow together, learn about the co-op models, business models, and all of what is needed to make your idea a success. And so I'll end it there. If you've got questions, feel free to reach out. It's my contact. Next steps, get engaged, right? Engage your community and engage us. We're part of your community. I would encourage you to sign up for the Co-op Monthly. It's on our website, coopfund.org, cooperativefund.org /about-us/newsletters, or you can connect with myself or my colleague, Carolyn. We have a connect with a coach function where you can book an appointment right on the website with one of us if you have an idea about a co-op that you're trying to start, or you have an issue with a co-op that you're currently involved in. And we'll have another workshop in November with Ujima, so stay tuned for the date. We're thinking it's going to be November 30th, but there'll be more communication on that. And then finally, we're going to have a participatory management initiative, which is for businesses who are thinking about transitioning to worker ownership or just engaging their employees in a more interesting and equitable way. So that'll be coming up in the new year, but if you sign up for a newsletter, you'll get all that information. So with that, I'm gonna invite you guys to ask me any questions or invite you to go and enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you.